Hi, everybody. Thanks for showing up. I hope you all have a cup of coffee or a sweet roll or something for hospitality. Maybe someday soon we'll get back to hospitality in the building. That would be great.
Right.
So I'm going to start my little PowerPoint program. There's only 12 slides. It's not going to take forever, and it's mostly pictures. So let's take a look here, and you'll get a chance to ask some questions afterwards. There we go. So how being a Catholic affects my writing. Well, I started thinking, how is the Catholic Church like a novel? Because that's what I do. I write novel, I write historical fiction. And so, let's see, I need to do something different. Hold on a second. Where do I start my, hold on. There we go, come on. I'm sorry, I have to do something different here for just a minute.
All right.
Let's see. How do I stop here? Okay. I'm trying to figure out how to get this started. We haven't run into this problem before. Let's see.
You'll figure it out. Just take a moment.
There we go. Okay, now I can do this. Let's see, slideshow from beginning. And no, it's not gonna work. Sorry, it'll get going in just a second. I'm just trying to figure out, let's see.
Is it on the top, on that top ribbon to the far right where there's a little symbol that goes up and has a box? And
it is, except, all right, I think I can get this now. From beginning. There we go. All right, can everybody see that?
Perfect.
Okay, great. All right, fine. There we go. False start. Being Catholic involves drama, symbols, reality, mystery, and action. And so does writing. So these are the 5 areas I'm going to just cover in the next few minutes to think about what being Catholic and especially in regards to me, how it affects my writing. So drama. What is more dramatic than the Passion of Christ? And it's a story that we find in many religions. The sacrifice and the resurrection of the God, the Savior of the world. But for Catholics, it's a particularly dramatic and recreated story every time we come to it. And then as a novelist, the backstory for Christ is just as amazing. The star, the wise men, the journey to one's birthplace, the link to the ancestors, everything so magical and so wonderful, and the angels appearing. So the backstory of Jesus' birth and life is obviously very dramatic. And then, of course, we have the miracles. And this man walks on water. I mean, think of the phrases that we use all the time, when feeding the hungry, the loaves and the fishes. So we have miracles. And then as, the conversion stories, Saul falling on the road to Damascus, and our mystic saints, and like Saint Teresa and like Saint Francis, who had the, I'm sorry, what do you call that? The stigmata, and the visions people have. I mean, we've all read the lives of the saints probably and heard about them since we were little kids. And it's just an amazing array of dramatic stories and conversions and changes and turning towards God and turning away from evil. So that's the drama. And then we have symbols. The most wonderful symbol, which I had a specific spiritual experience with once, indicated the host itself, like the moon in the sky. A symbol is a sign of something that is both itself in reality, in its 2 or 3 dimensions, and everything behind it the transcendence and everything that that stands for, like the moon in the sky. You only see the disk, but there's a whole moon, a whole planet behind it that you don't see, the things that are hidden in shadow. So a symbol is like that. It stands for itself and for so many other things. And of course, the Catholic symbols, the cross is one of the main ones, and the Holy Spirit, the dove, which has come in so many things. But we, you know, so those are like the basics, but we go beyond that in Catholicism. And again, I'm not claiming this as the Catholics are the only ones who do this, of course, because every religion, even every philosophy has its own symbols. So the pomegranate as a sign of abundance, and lilies, the sign of purity. So we have natural symbols, and this beautiful one of the pelican piercing her breast in order to feed the children. I know St. Cecilia's Church in the near West Portal here has a beautiful carving of the pelican on the front of its altar. And then the unicorn, which is a favorite one of mine. I don't know if you can see this at my book, The Unicorn in the Mirror. I traced a family through time in France who were directly connected with the unicorn tapestries. But as you go from 1500 to 1890, I think is where my book stops, the understanding of what the unicorn means changes, especially when the society becomes more secular. And while at first it was considered to be, you know, from a Christian point of view, a symbol of Christ and the purity and the uniqueness of the combination of the horse and the horn, as the society became more secularized, it brought different meanings, and people saw different things in it. And there's a wonderful quote, I think it's from Voltaire, that talks about the French people. The French people are not at all religious, but they are all Catholic. Which was again, and then we get into numbers for symbols, and we could talk about numbers and numerology all day long, but you know, 3, the Trinity, and then any multiple of 3. 7 is another very dramatic number, the 7 deadly sins, the 7 heavenly virtues, and the 12 apostles. And even certainly in the non-Catholic world, the numbers 3, 7, and 9, the 9 muses, the 7 pillars of Hercules, the 9 circles of hell, the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, the 4 evangelists. You go on and on. And so these kinds of things, sometimes they're there in our subconscious and we don't really think about them. But when I'm writing, or I should say, and when I'm writing, these numbers come up sort of automatically. And all of a sudden I realize that I've got some kind of trilogy going, or some kind of trio, or some kind of connection of 4 people that has a connection to what the number 4 means in terms of its solidity and its boundaries, like for the 4 directions, north, south, east, and west, and the 4 winds. And the number 4 always had that, whereas the number 3 is even more mystical number in terms of how the 3 things connect, and the triangle and the Trinity. So there's a lot to play with this. So then we get to reality. And although faith may require a leap into the unknown and perhaps the unknowable, it's always grounded in our senses, our experience of the real world, the relationships that we have where truth and loyalty live, in the daily actions that speak of love and compassion and virtue. So we know all these things, and the reality that we see in the seasons, that's the most, you know, other than our own body, that's probably the most present sense of how we find God and how we see the world in the different in the changing of the seasons. The repetition and the timelessness ties us to nature and to the cycles, and the things begin, things end, and then you get a chance of renewal again. In one of my novels called Ember Days, which relates to the old, it's a kind of discontinued practice now, although it's still there. The Ember Days were those days that marked the change of the season based on harvest and seed time and the change from winter to spring to summer to fall. And in that book, which was actually the very first novel I ever started to write, and it took me 15 years, and I wrote 4 other novels in between. It has a Catholic priest as the main character. And one of the initial scenes is him walking around the city, the town of Mendocino, praying his daily office as he turns down this street and he sees the ocean, and he turns down that street and he sees the headlands. And it just is an incorporation of the prayers, the psalms that he's praying, and the beauty and the interest of nature all around him. So one of my favorite things. Okay, mystery. Now, as we know, the heart of our faith is mystery. But like any good mystery, you get clues as to why things happen, who and how and what are all involved. Having been a former English teacher, I love entomology, so or etymology, where words come from. So Middle English mystery from Latin mysterium, from ancient Greek mysterion, a mystery, a secret rite, from mustes, initiated one, from mueo, I initiate, which ultimately comes from muo, I shut, which is, if just think about the possibilities of what that means. I shut, I close down, I shut out, I shut in, I stop something, but at the same time, what is it that you're stopping? What is it that you're closing off or enclosing possibly? So there's a lot of really interesting things. And of course, the Greek mystery religions, nobody knows what went on inside those little underground churches or little underground places where they had their ceremonies. But the early Christian church had that same model. And people, who were not initiated, and we see that, even till now, the people who are going through the rite of Christian initiation have to leave the Mass before the consecration, because that's part of the mystery, that until you're an initiate, you don't get to participate in. I mean, it's obviously not quite as closed off as it used to be in the old days, but there's still remnants of it. So the major clear mysteries that we have are, of course, the resurrection and the impossibility of that, and the just not even knowing what that means, and things like the assumption of Mary into heaven, another mystery. And we have the sacraments are considered the mysteries of the church, the 7 sacraments, and because it has a, just like the symbol, it has both a concrete physical reality, the oil on your head, or the host, or exchanging rings, or whatever. Each sacrament has some physical sign, and it also has behind it all of the transcendent mystery and connection to what God and the Holy Spirit is doing at that moment for you and in your soul. And then there are a couple of other kinds of mysterious things, like the Shroud of Turin and the meaning of ichthyos and the symbols that go with that. So our church is surrounded and imbued and just drenched in mystery. And it's a wonderful, it's a wonderful way to be, I think. It's a wonderful way to live in the midst of all these things that have so much meaning and so different. As I remember growing up, I went to a couple of Protestant services, and to me it was like going to a community meeting in some of them, because there was singing, and that was about all. There wasn't any incense, there wasn't any bells ringing. It was just kind of plain and ordinary, and I really preferred my Catholic church. So in searching the mystery, just as if you're writing a novel, a mystery story, you ask these questions. And then the one of the most important ones for me is the when, the idea of time, and that kind of that weird little picture. It's a clock inside of a cosmos, and I always think of time as being a little bubble inside of all of eternity, so that and the bubble has permeability, so you can move in and out of it. And when I write, almost all of my books have 2 different time periods where things are happening. And by the end of the stories are connected somehow. Something starts 500 years ago and the people are there in 1890. And then by the end of the story, the 2 stories keep coming together until the end they link together. So that's a sense of time and eternity working together. Of course, the big question is why, and I don't have any answers to that. That's part of what we have to do. So finally, action. This is the practical, action-oriented part of any story. What people do, what tests their character in face of adversity or pain or the need to sacrifice or to solve a mystery. You find out what your character is as you make decisions, as you compare your actions to a standard. These are the precepts that we've heard all of our lives in the gospel and Bible readings, in the stories of the lives of the saints, in the way our parents and our teachers and the gospel and our peers have taught us by their own behavior. So we know what action is in our lives, and it takes many forms. Participating at Mass, praying is an action. Helping out, helping our neighbors, and then the corporal works of mercy, visiting, those in prison, visiting the sick, helping the homeless. These are the things that as in a good novel, things have to happen. And as in good faith, you have to make things happen. You have to act in order to bring that faith into life. We'll skip this. Those are my books. But so that's kind of where I'm at with that, and maybe we have a couple things we could talk about, or people are interested in bringing up their own experiences about this. Does anybody have a particular symbol that they find speaks to them a lot in their lives? Enough people out there.
Why don't we make a pack?
So this is Robert.
Yeah.
For me, the cross of St. James is a symbol of my faith. Having walked the Camino de Santiago, it's something that's always resonated with me, and sort of the narrative that kind of surrounds St. James, and some of it's negative, but yeah. So whenever I see that cross, it sort of strikes me in a deep way, and just reminds me of sort of the powerful spiritual journey that I took.
I'm not familiar with the cross of St. James. Is it a particular kind of crucifix? I mean, like the Celtic cross or something?
Yeah, it's sort of it's got sort of almost sort of a sharp kind of at each extension of the cross. It's got sort of a triangular shape, and yeah, I wish I could share my screen to show you, but
Oh. Okay. Anybody else? Who else? I see people there. I know Maria. Come on, Maria. What's a good symbol for you? Take yourself off mute.
If you're waiting for her, I can talk about something, a dramatic instance of faith in my own life. It happened, my mother died, and some 6 months later, I was in a Boston College teaching, and for a whole more than once, I mean, 3 or 4 times at night when I was asleep, I was simply at the bedside where my mother was dying and seeing her die 4 or so times. And then out of nowhere, I heard her voice like she was speaking to me, like it really was her, saying, "What are you doing? I'm fine. I'm with God. You get on with your life now. Get on with your life."
Wow.
And for me, of course, it was the end of mourning. I mean, after that, I couldn't mourn her anymore. And if you ask me, was that just a symbol in my dream or whatever, or was it real? It felt as real to me, her speaking to me that way, as anything else I've ever experienced in my life. I mean, it really has stayed with me ever since.
Mhm. Wow, that's great. Maria?
That's amazing. Well, nothing that extraordinary. I was going to talk about the cross too, whether the cross of St. James or many others. To me, the cross is where it all resides. It is the faith that I see in good times and bad times, and it speaks to me of Christ's love and sacrifice and forgiveness. It's like everything is contained in there. And also a cross speaks of a crossroad. When you get where we get to so many crossroads in life, and it's amazing thing that we take one road or the other, and what is happening in life is by taking the other arm of the cross. Some of your novels, Mary, have a lot to do with that.
Mhm. Thank you. In fact, I just finished one this last October that I termed a fictional alternative biography. There is autobiography, because I started with the idea, what would have happened if I hadn't stayed in San Francisco but had gone back to Chicago, as soon as I got here and was disappointed or whatever. And so I just reconstructed a whole different life that I might have lived. And it was very interesting. It was really a pandemic kind of novel, very interior, very emotional, actually, thinking about what I could have done.
Is it out?
Yes, it's out. It is out.
Oh,
You have it in your hand.
No, I read something about that, but no, the latest one I read is this one.
Yeah, that's it. That's the one. Of
That's
Ripeness in the River. Yeah.
right. Well, okay, that's it.
That's right. Amy, you want to say something?
Well, since we were talking about the cross, and I have a sort of a story about that. Again, not as dramatic as some of the other stories, but I was away from the church for a very long time. I probably left in my early 20s, and there was a time when I was born and raised Catholic, so there was a time when I would go to church with one of my parents, and I was in the church, but when I looked at the cross, I didn't understand. I sort of didn't understand it anymore. I was like, I thought it was violent, and I was basically turned off by the cross at that time. And then when we started to come back that's another whole story, but back in around 2000, and all of a sudden it had incredible meaning for me, because I recognized it as a symbol of sacrifice and a symbol of love. So it was very interesting that whatever was going on inside of me, it infused the symbol with either not meaning or with meaning. And it was a huge difference. It was like 1 minute I was like, I don't get it. I've lost touch with it. Or I didn't even know I'd lost touch with it. I just didn't get it anymore. And then when I came back, it was like, oh, it means so much,
Yeah.
Everything.
Well, I think a lot of us took a vacation around our college years. I know I did too. And then came back with a completely different sense of having lived for a while and realized, but I never lost the sense of Every time I was in trouble, it was Hail Mary, full of grace, Hail Mary, full of grace, Hail Mary, full of grace. I was like that. I say that every night as I'm falling asleep.
Yeah, I think I ran away because I had too much of the Catholic guilt was part of my psyche, and I needed to get purged that a bit. Still have it.
I actually went to a therapist once. It was after my first partner died, after my mother died, and my friends kept saying, go see a therapist, go see a psychiatrist. So I went to one, and after 2 sessions, he said to me, you know, I'm probably not the best person to be dealing with for you because I'm not religious and I don't believe in anything that way. And I think actually that your problems are connected to your faith. So you probably ought to go talk to somebody who, you know, believes the same things you do. And I was just amazed. I mean, it was great that he said that because obviously he didn't think he was going to be able to help me, but he thought my being Catholic was the problem, which I don't think it was. Yes, Mary, clip.
I was thinking that one of the issues that is so outstanding about the church to me is how it blesses the dedication of some people completely to the spiritual. I think that, for example, some of the Carmelites or the Cistercians, the Trappists, who spend their entire lives living, working, breathing, praying, sacrificing, whatever, you know, all the things that they do makes for an incredible source of strength in the church and in the world that we may not even understand. But the blessing of those activities is, I think, one of the most important roles of the church, so that we have that spiritual energy at play in the world.
Great comment. Anybody else? What about the mysteries? You know, we call all the rosaries, the mysteries of the rosary, they're all called mysteries too. Although, Louisa, you said you had something else, perhaps.
Oh, hi. I just want to say thanks for your talk. It was beautifully concise and to the point. I just like sitting in the church and being surrounded with the architecture and the art and the physical symbols. But I especially like I'm not even sure what it's called. I always thought it was like the eternal candle. It's the candle usually on the left side of the altar or on the right as you're facing it. And it's usually in a red candle holder.
Oh,
I like all the symbols.
The sanctuary candle. The sanctuary candle, it shows the presence of God in the church.
Yeah, that means a great deal to me. And when I've traveled and I've gone to mass, there it is, you know, it's in London and Chicago and back east. But I also was struck, it was a major moment in a TV show long ago of Brideshead Revisited. I'm not talking about, I didn't see any remakes, but I'm the one that was originally broadcast, I think in the 70s. It's quite a long time ago.
Yeah.
And at the end of the show, there was this moment where they closed the chapel for the family. It was very moving. Anyway, I miss that. You know, I feel like my cell structure sort of realigns itself when I sit within the symmetry of the architecture of a church and just focus on physically what's there. And I do like on the altar, they have the pelican with her young at St. Ignatius and the angels around the altar above it. And, you know, the shrine for, I don't know if it's a shrine, St. Ignatius, his death mask, it's just fascinating to me. Anyway, I just want to say, I'm so glad you gave your talk today. It's been very meaningful. I'm going to
Thank you.
Mary, it is really a beautiful experience to not only be inspired by your excellent presentation, but also by the response of all the people who have spoken today, I am truly touched by the different revelations, I guess you could call them, from Father John through everyone who has spoken, has revealed their own different, distinct, unique way of interpreting the presence of God, whether it is physically through the physicality of the inside of St. Ignatius Church or anywhere else in the world, or whether it's through the spiritual presence of the monks praying and the sisters of the Carmelite order, etc., praying for us as we know that the Buddhist monks pray constantly for the congregation, for the community. It's really kind of magnificent what you've brought out today. I commend and admire always Mary Burns.
Oh, yeah.
You are an incredible human being and a beautiful human being and a wonderful person.
Well, thank you so much. That's really
No,
great.
no, Mary, you are extraordinary. If people only knew the number of things that you do for parishioners and non-parishioners, my good gosh.
Yes, you know that too. Kevin and Maria are helping a little old lady who can't get out to take her car out of her garage every couple of weeks and drive it around so that the battery won't die.
I found that amazingly easy to do yesterday. I really did.
Good, good. I tried to do it. I almost wrecked her car on the side of the garage. Other people must have some things. Come on, don't be shy. Say
I'd like to share the symbol that I love the symbol of the dove bringing the olive branch, and that as a sign of peace, and just that, out of the idea that out of nowhere this thing arrives that changes the whole dynamic in the situation is beautiful. And a friend of mine told me the story of going to her son's wedding in Italy, and the two families hadn't really met before. And the bride's family, the parents had been divorced. And then after the rehearsal dinner, there was some difficult situation that came up, and animosity and all of this. And everybody was like, oh, what's going to happen tomorrow at the wedding? And she's not Catholic, but she decided to go out that evening where there were olive trees and cut some branches out and put them in front of the door of all the hotel rooms.
Wow.
So when people came out in the morning, they saw this olive branch, and the day went really smoothly and beautifully, and how this symbol helps be a moment of conversion for people. I love that.
That's a great story.
Yeah.
Wow. I've often thought I would like to make a compendium of Bible verses, both Old Testament and New Testament, for everyday phrases that people use. And so many people, especially young people who aren't churched, have no idea where they come from. Like offering, the olive branch, or, and the dove, and people, it's like people using Shakespeare without knowing that it comes from Shakespeare. But there are just so many biblical references that have gone into everyday conversation that if people knew where they came from, it would be so much richer and so much more interesting. And yet there's so many people growing up, the kids growing up, that don't even have any religion at all. I mean, it's like such a lack of education.
It's a tragic loss, actually. It's not only a lack of education, Mary. It's a truly tragic loss for society and the community of our world.
Yeah, it is. It is. I mean, you can deplore the lack of morals and ethics in the world, but I think not having an organized religion to kind of keep people focused is really making a big difference in the world.
So this is, I don't know that this is a symbol actually, but it's kind of a very foundational idea that I remember learning as a child, and from Catholic school upbringing, but it's the idea that we're all brothers and sisters, like that we're all one family. And I think that's, for me, one of the most moving concepts that is part of our faith. It's just so much the foundation of everything for me. And the notion that, there's nothing that separates us, and it doesn't matter if the other person's Catholic or not. It's just that we are one human family.
Mhm.
I don't know if that's a symbol or a mystery, but maybe it just comes under the category of reality for me.
There's a concept that I've read about that is called one's personal mythology. And that if you look back and you think about what are the things that you define yourself by? Like, how do you think of yourself? And it's like your own personal myth. Like mine is ever since being in Catholic grade school, we used to go out at lunchtime and play this game called Going to Heaven, Going to Hell. And someone would be Satan and someone would be Michael the Archangel, and then everybody'd line up and he'd pull kids back and forth across this line, and the one who ended up with the most souls, was the winner. And I was almost always Saint Michael. I was always, grabbing people and pulling them into heaven and everything. And so to me, that's part of my personal mythology. I mean, I see myself as somebody who's got to save other people, got to help them no matter what. I've got to make sure that, and nobody else can do that but me. So it has its shadow side as well. But
I'd like to just pick up on what Amy was talking about. We're all one. Okay. Well, we live in a world where it's very much us versus them. So we aren't all one. And I'm really taken. I've got to write something pretty soon about Catholic social teaching, but I'm taken by the way Pope Francis has made that so clear across religions. Muslims and Catholics are one in some profound way. Protestants and Catholics are one. Blacks and whites and Asians are one. I mean, it's really it's about as dramatic a way to bring about unity in our world and to oppose the us versus them, which is so surrounds us everywhere. So I do agree with you that that's a very, very important thing. We're all brothers and sisters, and it might be helpful. I just was dealing with somebody I know, and there's family division. The son and the mother don't talk to one another. So it's amazing to me how in many families, and frequently it's because somebody died and left money, and then they're fighting over who gets it and whatever, that people forget that they're one, or brothers and sisters, and I find that just tragic. I didn't always agree with all my brothers and sisters, but we always remained one. So anyway, I want to underscore your point. It really touches me too.
Nice.
anybody else out there want to speak up? Have something to say?
Well, I was going to ask you something, Mary. Have you gotten from readers who read your novels a reaction about some of the things that you're talking about here, how it speaks to them and their faith, and move them to action? Maybe you can share some of those.
Well, it's interesting. One notable one from my Ember Days novels, Father Greg was so taken with it, he actually used part of some of the quotes in a homily he gave once, because he was really struck with it. And I can't even remember now what it was that he did it. But interestingly enough, I've heard from people who are not religious, people who are not Catholic, who have read my Catholic books, even the woman who wrote the Bible and the Isaac and Ishmael stories. They thought, they were reluctant to read them because they thought, oh, well, I don't know anything about the Bible. I've never read this. You read it. So I said, don't worry. I think you'll get the story anyway. And so many of them said they had no idea that there was that kind of interesting story, in the Bible. I mean, they just saw it as a bunch of rules, and of course, writing it as a novel made it more emotional and more plot driven and that kind of thing, because it is hard to read the Bible and get the real story out of it in certain parts. But I think there was that, and then a number of people, especially with Ember Days, which is a very kind of a dark story, but it has a lot to do with people being tested in their faith. And people have told me that they never forget those characters, and they're always thinking when they come to a difficult place in their life, it's like, you know, those people turn to God again. And so maybe I can do that too. So that's always very encouraging.
Well, after reading Amber Days, Kevin and I just had to go to Mendocino. We spent a long weekend retracing your steps.
And it's marvelous, just marvelous.
An amazing experience.
I
Yeah.
do love that little town. I haven't been up there for several years now. I got to go back.
Yeah, right.
Beautiful place.
It is a beautiful place, yeah.
Particularly if you read Amber Days before you go.
Right.
Yeah, right.
Or maybe you can read it while you're there. So what are the actions that we might be moved to take based on our thoughts?
I'm sorry, based on what?
Based on these thoughts. I'm reading from your slide.
Oh, yes, right. Okay, right.
So who wants to start?
What are the actions you might take? I mean, so many of you who are here, like Amy and Kevin and Maria and Mary Clip, I know you're very all involved in the ministries of the parish, and other people too that I'm not familiar with here. But we can always do more.
Well, obviously, that's actually partly why I'm motivated to be involved with Las Vecinas, our sister parish, is just that whole notion that, and why I went down there for delegation was just the feeling of connection to people from another part of the world.
Anyway.
So again, pretty basic.
And it really brings home the concept that we are one and brothers and sisters, because we come from different cultures, different experiences, different realities right now, and yet we feel so connected.
Mm-hmm.
Well, go ahead. Go ahead, Maria. Oh, okay. Well, I was earlier before I came on this, I'm doing the Mass on Thursday, which is Earth Day. And so I was trying to get the ordinary lectionary doesn't have things. So I was trying to get readings about, climate change. But for me, the important thing is not just to talk about it or be worried about it, because I really am. It's something I've been studying and writing about since 2004. But that thing of what actions, and I'm really impressed in our parish by Mary LeBaron and her husband and others in the Laudato Si group. So it's not only that they're talking about the issues, but various actions like picking up garbage or leading protests and whatever. And it's easier for me to get the thoughts than to be clean and clear about how to do the actions. And I think that's an important issue that you raise. I mean, how do you turn this into something that you do, whatever it is? I mean, okay, do I find ways to help the homeless, or what do I do to actions to deal with climate change and whatever? So anyway, that's
Mary Clip.
I think a major, I hate to, what is it, idea or concept about doing charity, whatever it is, the actions that you do, you realize that you're getting more from doing it than you ever could think. So once those actions become a relational thing, and you realize that your faith is getting more and more rain and sunshine and seeding, and that by the actions, that's, I think, where the in a sense the nugget of your faith is. When you see that, you not just see, you know that when you're doing something, you're getting something back, and that you cannot live without that getting something back, whatever that is, whether it's from the homeless or whether it's from donating to some cause that, you know, gay kids that are on the run because they aren't loved, whatever it is that brings your heart to life, you just know you have to do it, and you just know it's blessed.
Well, it's a good thing that we can say we know it, because I know there's been plenty of times in my life when I've been doing quote unquote good works, and it's the last thing on earth I want to be doing.
All right.
You know, it's like, oh my God, do I have to do this again for
Right.
this person or whatever, you know? And I always look back to my mother, was sort of like, well, you just have to do what you got to do. You do your duty and just do it, you know, one foot in front of the other, and, you know, it'll be all right. You know, you're doing something good. So even if you don't like it, do it anyway.
I think for me, one of the things that the call to action is definitely about bringing people together who might have different experiences and creating an environment where they can develop a friendship that they wouldn't have expected. And I'm realizing, you know, during this pandemic, my youngest son came back from New York because he had just quit his job when the pandemic started, and he was going to travel. And he realized being in New York at that time was not going to work. So he came home and lived at home. And my father died about 8 years ago, and he had a passion for taking photographs. And I brought back all of his slides, which are in the 10,000s. And this son of mine is really interested in art and photography, and he spent many hours, I mean, an unbelievable number of hours going through these slides and choosing ones to be scanned. And so over this year, we've sent them out to the Scan Cafe, and I've been looking at, and then now we you know, every couple of days or a week or so, he'll come. He's now moved out, but he'll come over and we'll spend an hour or so looking at these slides together. And I am realizing how lucky I was to have a father who he had just beautiful composition in his photographs, and he really enjoyed people. I mean, I definitely got that from my father, just the love of meeting people with different stories and learning about them. My father grew up in Argentina. He was American, but he grew up in Argentina, so he was bilingual, and he just, you can see in his photographs how much he loved people. And some of the pictures are from my nursery school. I went to a co-op nursery school in Connecticut. My first teacher was Black, and several of the kids in my class were Black. They were Jewish people. It was a very diverse group of people, and he has pictures of us in nursery school, and you can see through the photographs how much respect he had for the work of children, the play. And I realized how lucky I was to have this childhood where I grew up with Black kids. We were invited, you know, they were invited to our house. We went and did things together. And then I continued, you know, my high school was half Black. So I'm realizing how unusual that experience was. And that allowed me to have those Black friends from college that I moved to California with, who are my created family here since my family's back on the East Coast. And I'm realizing how unique that was now. I didn't like appreciate it earlier. And I feel like that has definitely been a gift that moves me to action and moves me to help other people feel comfortable in situations that they just are new to them.
Lovely.
A beautiful story.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
And very meaningful.
Mhm.
I was reminded when Father John was talking about his the dream he had about his mother. The latest book that I wrote, of Ripeness in the River, started with an actual dream I've had all my life, a recurring dream of seeing a woman running down a hill, like dressed like in the 1890s or something, long black dress, running down a hill in the middle of the night with the house burning behind her and running down towards the river. And I had that dream probably every year of my life, about 5 years ago. And I always thought that it meant I was that woman, and that I had lived, 100 years ago or so in some place. And then through a series of really interesting events, I found some that indicated that such a woman may have existed, and that's when I started writing this book. That's part of it. But I think dreams are like that time and eternity. Dreams are permeable, and they open up into different realities that things that are there that we can't see every day. I mean, I think that's what I love so much about being Catholic, is that you're allowed to think about eternity and about things you can't see. It's like people always say, well, do you believe the devil is real? And it's like, well, I don't see him with horns and a tail and that kind of thing, but I remember once playing with the Ouija board long ago, and someone was saying, oh, the church says you can't play with Ouija boards, and I said, well, why not? And someone said, it's because evil is real, and you don't know what you're playing with when you start to tap into things that you can't see. And I was really impressed with that answer. It didn't stop me from playing with the Ouija board, but that whole sense of everything that's out there that we can access through symbols, through mystery, through our faith, sometimes even our lack of faith, our doubts and our fears. It's all grist for the great novel that is the Age.
Mary, thank you so much for this just wonderful presentation and the discussion, and for everyone who's joined us today. It's really been a treat to hear each other's stories and get to know each other better through these experiences. And now I'm intrigued to read more of your books. So thank you.